There is a kind of pull that does not announce itself. You do not see it coming, yet you feel it immediately, a quiet, magnetic current that moves between two people. It lingers in a glance held a moment too long, in the way a conversation seems to dip into deeper waters without warning. Married men, perhaps more than they realize, can be drawn to women who carry a certain vulnerability, not loud, not desperate, but the kind that lives in the spaces between her words, in the softness of her defenses, a fragility that feels rare. And it is this quiet rarity that can stir something deep inside him, something he may not even admit to himself. This attraction is not simply about beauty or physical presence. It goes deeper, tapping into subconscious patterns and emotional imprints that have been shaped long before adulthood. Vulnerability, when perceived, can awaken a sense of purpose, power, or even protection in some men. For married men, this pull may feel especially intense, not because they are seeking to replace their commitments, but because vulnerability has a way of bypassing the rational mind and speaking directly to the instinctive one. Vulnerability can act like a mirror. It reflects back a man's own unspoken longings, the parts of himself that have been buried under years of responsibility, restraint, and the image of stability. In seeing another person's rawness, he is reminded of his own. This is not always conscious. In fact, it often happens beneath awareness, as if the attraction exists in a language older than words. The woman's fragility may stir in him a desire to nurture, to protect, or to heal impulses that may have no outlet in his current life. Yet, there is a deeper complexity here. Vulnerability can be perceived in many forms. Sometimes it is emotional openness. Sometimes it is a certain hesitancy in the way she moves or speaks, as though she carries an invisible weight. Sometimes it is in her eyes a fleeting shadow of pain that she tries to hide but cannot fully mask. For some men, especially those in marriages that have become emotionally distant or routine, this vulnerability can feel like a spark in a dim room. It becomes a reminder of emotional intensity, of connection that feels alive and unscripted. For the woman, this can be both a blessing and a danger. On one hand, her vulnerability can draw deep empathy and genuine care. On the other, it can invite attention from those who are not equipped to truly hold it with respect. A married man who feels this pull may not always recognize the full complexity of his own motives. He might believe he is simply concerned, intrigued, or inspired to help. But beneath that, there may be a subtle intoxication in feeling needed, in stepping into a role where his presence feels like it makes a tangible difference. Psychologically, this pull can be explained through archetypes. Carl Jung spoke about the anima, the feminine aspect within the male psyche. The vulnerable woman can become a projection screen for this inner feminine image. She may embody qualities that he has repressed or idealized. In her presence, he is not only interacting with her as an individual, but also with parts of himself that he has long forgotten. This makes the connection feel both deeply personal and strangely universal. However, attraction to vulnerability is not purely noble. It can also be tied to shadow elements, the unacknowledged desires and impulses that live in the unconscious. A man may seek out a vulnerable woman not purely to protect her, but to feel a sense of control or superiority. Vulnerability, in the wrong hands, can be exploited. This is why awareness is so crucial. Without it, what feels like deep connection can quickly become an imbalance of power, where one person's openness is used as leverage by another. From the perspective of the vulnerable woman, it is important to understand that the energy she carries is not a flaw, but a force. Vulnerability, when embraced consciously, is a form of authenticity. It is the courage to be seen without armor. Yet, it is also a magnet for certain dynamics, some healing, others harmful. Learning to discern who is drawn to her vulnerability, and why, can make the difference between relationships that nourish and those that drain. The married man's pull toward vulnerability may also have roots in his own unmet needs. If his relationship lacks emotional intimacy, if his life has become dominated by structure and duty, the rawness of a vulnerable woman can feel like fresh air. She represents freedom from the performance of perfection, from the silent agreements that keep deeper emotions unspoken. In her presence, he may feel more alive, more connected to the parts of himself that have grown dormant. There is also the element of projection from the woman's side. A vulnerable woman may see in a married man qualities she associates with stability, safety, and strength. These qualities may feel especially alluring if her life has been marked by uncertainty. This mutual projection, hers toward her openness, hers toward his perceived solidity, creates a magnetic loop. Both feel seen in ways that are rare, yet both are seeing only parts of the whole truth. In many ways, this dynamic is less about the individuals and more about the unmet parts of their psyches finding a reflection. It is about wounds recognizing wounds, needs recognizing needs, and while this recognition can spark connection, it can also blur the line between genuine love and psychological entanglement. The danger lies in mistaking intensity for compatibility. Just because someone triggers strong feelings does not mean they are meant to be a central figure in your life. Often, the relationships born from such intense recognition serve as mirrors. They show you what you have not yet healed, what you still yearn for, and where you may still give away your power. The truth is, attraction to vulnerability is as old as human connection itself. In some cases, it leads to genuine care, mutual growth, and deep emotional bonding. In others, it becomes a cycle where one person's openness feeds another's need for dominance, rescue, or validation. For the married man, the question is not only why he is drawn, but what he intends to do with that pull. For the vulnerable woman, the question is whether the attention she receives honors her or diminishes her. Understanding this dynamic requires honesty. It demands that both parties look beyond the surface story they tell themselves. The married man must ask if he is seeking to fill a void without addressing the deeper truths in his own life. The vulnerable woman must ask if she is allowing her openness to be met with respect or if she is mistaking attention for love. This is not about shaming the attraction. It is about bringing it into awareness. When something is unconscious, it can control you without you realizing it. When it becomes conscious, you have the choice to navigate it with integrity. And in the end, integrity is what determines whether an attraction leads to healing or harm. The connection between a married man and a vulnerable woman can feel charged, fated, even inevitable. But beneath that, it is the meeting of two inner landscapes, each carrying its own history, its own longing, and its own shadow. To navigate it well requires not only desire, but discernment. When both see clearly, the dynamic can be transformed from a quiet trap into an opportunity for growth. When they do not, it becomes another story of connection that began with fire but ended with ashes. Before we go deeper, if you have ever felt that certain patterns keep repeating in your relationships, no matter how much you try to change them, the Jung method can help you uncover why. It shows you how to break the unconscious cycles that shape who you're drawn to and who is drawn to you. The link is pinned in the first comment. Attraction between a married man and a vulnerable woman often begins in a space that feels almost accidental. Neither sets out to create the dynamic, yet both can find themselves caught in it, as if it were written into some hidden script. This is because vulnerability and unmet longing speak to each other in ways that are difficult to resist. The married man may be living a life that appears stable on the outside, but feels emotionally unfulfilled within. Routine can become a quiet prison. Expectations from work, family, and society shape him into an image of reliability and strength. Yet inside, there may be an unacknowledged hunger for authenticity, intensity, and connection. When he encounters a woman who carries visible fragility, he experiences a jolt, the sensation of something raw and unfiltered, cutting through the layers of performance. For the vulnerable woman, the presence of a married man can radiate qualities she associates with safety. His stability, his composure, and his life experience may feel like a shelter she has long been searching for. She may not consciously seek him out, but when he enters her space, there is a subtle gravitational pull. This is not always about romance or desire at first. Often it is about the psychological comfort of feeling protected, understood, or anchored. In Jungian psychology, such encounters are not coincidences, but manifestations of the unconscious, seeking balance. The vulnerable woman may represent the man's anima, the inner feminine energy that has been neglected or suppressed. She mirrors back to him the softness, openness, and emotional expressiveness that he has either lost touch with or feels he cannot safely display in his current life. Conversely, the married man may embody for her the archetype of the protector or guide, filling a symbolic role that speaks to her own inner needs. The danger emerges when neither person realizes they are interacting with these inner archetypes, rather than with the whole, real person in front of them. When the connection is based on projections, it can feel intoxicating but is inherently fragile. The man may not truly see the woman in all her dimensions. He sees the part of her that matches what he longs for, and she may not truly see him. She sees the parts that fit the narrative of safety and stability she desires. When the emotional chemistry becomes charged, it can override the rational mind. This is especially true if either person has unhealed wounds that make the dynamic feel familiar. A man who grew up needing to protect or rescue others may find that being around a vulnerable woman gives him a sense of identity and worth. A woman who learned to find safety in strong figures may overlook warning signs if she feels that familiar security in his presence. The intensity of this attraction can create a sense of destiny, the belief that the two were meant to meet. Yet, often, what feels like fate is actually the unconscious seeking resolution for something unresolved. This is why such connections can feel both irresistible and dangerous. The pull is real, but so is the potential for imbalance. In some cases, the man's attraction to vulnerability becomes a form of escape. It allows him to feel alive in ways his current life does not. The relationship or interaction becomes a private world, separate from the duties and expectations that define him. For the woman, the attention of someone who seems steady and experienced can feel like a lifeline, affirming her worth in moments when she doubts herself. But here lies the paradox. What makes the connection so powerful is also what makes it unstable. It is built on needs and wounds as much as it is built on genuine connection. Without awareness, the dynamic can lead to disappointment, emotional harm, or even betrayal. Vulnerability, when met with unclear intentions, can turn from a source of beauty into a point of exploitation. The healthiest path for both is to bring the unconscious into the light. This means asking difficult questions. For the married man, what am I truly seeking in this connection? Is it her as a whole person, or is it what she represents to me? For the vulnerable woman, does his attention empower me, or does it bind me to someone else's unfulfilled needs? When such questions are faced honestly, the relationship can evolve into something more grounded. The attraction may remain, but it is no longer an invisible force pulling the two together without their consent. Instead, it becomes a conscious choice, one where boundaries are respected and the reality of the situation is fully acknowledged. Even if the two decide not to pursue the connection, the awareness gained can be transformative. The man may discover that what he longs for in her is actually a part of himself that he has been neglecting. The woman may realize that the safety she seeks in him can be cultivated within herself. Ultimately, the truth is that vulnerability will always draw attention. It is part of its nature. But who it draws, and what they do with it, determines whether it becomes a source of empowerment or a source of harm. Married men may feel the pull for reasons deeply embedded in their psyche. But awareness is the line between a fleeting emotional escape and a genuine human connection. The story is not about blaming one or the other. It is about seeing clearly what is happening beneath the surface, so that choices are made from clarity rather than compulsion. And when clarity comes, it reveals something important. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is a form of truth. And truth, when honored, can transform even the most complicated connections into moments of real understanding. The truth is that human connection is never just about the present moment. Every attraction carries with it the echoes of the past. A married man who is drawn to a vulnerable woman is not simply responding to her as she is today. He is responding to the way her presence awakens something in him, an old memory, an unfinished chapter, a part of himself that he had learned to keep hidden. In many cases, this pull has roots in early emotional experiences. If, as a child, he learned that his value came from protecting others, fixing problems, or stepping in when someone was in distress, vulnerability in another person will stir those old reflexes. It will feel almost automatic to lean in, to offer comfort, to create a sense of safety. The connection becomes a stage on which his old identity plays out, even if he does not consciously realize it. For the woman, the story can be equally deep. A lifetime of feeling unseen or unsafe can create a heightened sensitivity to people who exude stability. The married man may represent something symbolic, not just a person, but an anchor in a world that often feels unstable. His attention may awaken a sense of worthiness, as if his recognition validates something she has long doubted in herself. Yet, this is also why the connection can be so consuming. It is not only about two people meeting in the present, it is about two histories colliding, two sets of unmet needs, finding temporary resonance in each other. The intensity comes from this overlap of longing, but so does the fragility, because when the need is so deep, the fear of losing the connection can be overwhelming. This fear often shows itself in subtle ways, in overthinking small interactions, in seeking reassurance, in reading too much into every word or gesture. Both may feel an unspoken pressure to keep the connection alive, not because it is always healthy, but because it feels essential. This is where the line between attraction and dependency begins to blur. Dependency changes the balance. Instead of a connection built on choice, it becomes one built on need. The married man may begin to feel that he is responsible for her emotional state. The vulnerable woman may feel that her sense of worth depends on his continued attention. In this way, what began as an almost magical pull can turn into a quiet trap. The challenge and the opportunity lies in turning this dynamic into a mirror rather than a prison. To see it not as a fated romance or an irresistible temptation, but as a reflection of deeper truths. When both are willing to step back and examine what the connection is really made of, they can begin to separate projection from reality. One of the most empowering shifts for the vulnerable woman is to reclaim her own narrative. Vulnerability is not about being at the mercy of others. It is about having the courage to be seen as you are. When she begins to see herself not as someone who needs rescuing, but as someone capable of standing in her own truth, the dynamic changes. The magnetic pull does not disappear, but it is no longer the only force at play. For the married man, the growth comes in recognizing the difference between connection and escape. If what he feels with her is driven by the absence of something in his own life, the only lasting solution is to address that absence directly. This may mean confronting the emotional distance in his marriage, facing his own fears about intimacy, or acknowledging desires he has kept hidden even from himself. When these inner truths are faced, the attraction can be transformed. It can shift from something unconscious and compulsive into something conscious and grounded. The relationship, whether it continues, changes form, or comes to an end, can then become a chapter of growth rather than a source of ongoing conflict. And perhaps most importantly, both can walk away with a clearer understanding of themselves. The vulnerable woman may see that she is not defined by who is drawn to her. The married man may see that what he was searching for in her was, in fact, a part of himself waiting to be rediscovered.